The faith itself is simple, but your faith isn't always supposed to stay simple. The one thing which has been hard for me to communicate is, I think, why, especially at Grace Church, things seem so complicated, right? The simple answer for that is it's so hard and complicated to unlearn and then to relearn something new, right? In my mind, Pluto was still a planet. I complain about this a lot in sermons. If you go to Grace Church, you've heard it. It bothers me, right? It was in a textbook. I took tests on it. I had to do a project on it. I had to present on it. It was like, it's in my mind, right? Pluto is a planet. And then for you to tell me now that it's not, right? If I were in school today and a teacher told me that, Pluto is not a planet, okay, sure, whatever, right? But if you're gonna tell me now, after I've lived all these years, it's cemented, I've done the projects, I've done the studies, I saw the books and the pictures, and we did all the stuff, and now you're gonna tell me Pluto's not a planet. Now I'm gonna be frustrated and say, why, right? Now you're gonna have to prove it to me, And so in that moment, now as scientists or whoever is qualified, is kind of to break down all the details of what qualifies a planet from a moon, from an asteroid, whatever it is. And now we're going to get into really detailed stuff. And then when they give me new information, I'm going to push back with a question. And now things get complicated. And so the reason things often are not simple, especially at Grace Church, is because we've already been taught the wrong way to think about things, about God, about salvation, about, the faith, about Jesus. That's why often it gets so complicated. It's not that the thing itself is complicated. It's just that we first encountered the thing, Jesus, God, with the wrong ideas. Imagine if you have never met your father and you've only ever heard stories from other people of who your dad is. You're 35, right? And he finally sits down with you to meet you. So excited to see you. He has a good reason why he's been gone, so on and so forth. But just to get to know who this person really is, who your father really is, you're already sitting down with all these stories people have told you about who this man is and why this man hasn't been in your life. And for this, person to have a chance to connect with you, it's gonna mean you're gonna have to allow who this person is to kind of pierce through this image you already have of who they are. And that is a huge obstacle for us to figure out. And so again, it's not complex, it's very simple. The faith is a very simple thing. But unfortunately, to learn what the faith truly is, after we've learned a false faith, that's complex. In seminary, you go to a place that's all about trying to uncover the scriptures and the Bible and what it means and all this different stuff. And in sermons with pastors, they'll often tell you about the Greek or back in Roman times or back in Egyptian times, whatever. And again, I think the primary reason for that is, again, it's the unlearning. The idea is that there's already so many pictures we already have in our mind of what we think it means. And again, it's very straightforward. It takes a lot of tools and a lot of explanation and a lot of information to explain to us why the first idea we had about God or the first thing we were taught might not be the accurate one. And so in theology and science and all the different fields of study with God, we're always discovering more, which means we always have to go back and say, okay, so we thought this, but perhaps it's not. And truthfully, the Bible itself is a story, an unending story of how humanity was always thinking they knew who God was and having to unlearn who they thought God was and learn who he was now. Oh, we thought God was just the God of Israel. We thought God was the God who was only found inside the temple, but now he's not in the temple anymore. Maybe he's not just the God of Israel. Maybe he's now also the God of all of the cosmos, as the Apostle Paul would say, right? And so it's not a new thing for Christians to have to unlearn in order to learn. It's part of the process. Okay, now here's where I have to kind of put an add-on, right? The addendum, right, to what I'm preaching on in this sermon about simple. The faith itself is simple, but your faith isn't always supposed to stay simple. With my sons, as they play baseball, the questions they ask me about the game, when they're playing t-ball, are pretty basic. Hey, when I'm at first base, which base do I run to next? Oh, it's that one over there. It's second base. But now for Jude, he's a little bit older. He's 9 now, and so it's his first year of kid pitch, and I'm so thankful for the coaching we have because it's getting complex. Now they're having to figure out when I'm on first base and there's a runner here, and the pitcher's about to throw a pickoff, which heel stays on the base? Which foot do I lean out? Do I lean out immediately and wait for the ball? Do I wait for the ball to get 6 feet away and then I lunge? Do I, do I squeeze my glove, or do I keep it loose when I catch that? I mean, there's all these details, right? And so baseball is this game where, all these things just get more and more nuanced. There's so much complexity to it as they get older. And so now Jude, as he's pitching now, it's not just, okay, I want you to hold the ball in your hand. Now I want you to hold it with these fingers in these places. Now I want you to, to point it back, but now I want you to tilt a little bit up. And again, if you're not asking new questions, the question to you is, are you really growing? Because the one thing I found with every human being is every one of us has an area that our interests draw us deeper into it. If it's fishing, if it's watching the Razorbacks, if it's our job, if it's a person, we're dating someone, and we ask around to our friends about them. We always want to go deeper in our understanding of things we care about. If we're not asking questions, often it's a question of how much do we really care about this thing, right? How much do I really care about God if my faith stays simple? Now the heart, the center of our faith is always going to stay simple. I mean, it's always going to be the same basic thing, right? God loves me, right? He is love. He has forgiven me. He is a good God, right? All these things are very simple. But figuring out what it looks like for me to accept love, to learn to offer love to other people, to learn to love my enemies. How do I love my friends better? How do I be, more, Christ-like in my marriage? These things start getting more complex. And so even though the faith always stays simple, your faith should always be growing in complexity and depth, right? Because we're trying to now apply these things to how we work, how we parent, how we're friends to people, how we're married, how we vote, right? It gets more and more complex as we grow. And if it's not getting more deep and more complex, I question whether or not it's really growing. Because in any hobby that you have or any passion you have, you always want to learn more about the things you're passionate about. And the things that we don't want to know more about, typically we're not passionate about those things.